In a quiet corner of this Staffordshire graveyard lies a man whose work changed the world of criminology and still shapes every police investigation to this day, yet almost no one knows his name. His name was Henry Faulds, and he was many things through his life: a doctor, a missionary, a scientist. But above all else, he was a man whose idea would eventually change the world. Today, his name is practically forgotten, but every time a crime is solved using fingerprint technology or is matched in a database, we're witness to the legacy of discovery this man made long before it was recognised. Faulds was born in Scotland in 1843, a time when medicine was still in its infancy and the Victorian world was just beginning to open up. It was a time of restless curiosity and a desire to understand the world more deeply. It was this curiosity that was surely baked into Faulds himself that would take him far from his native land and ultimately lead him towards one of the most important scientific insights of his time. Before Henry Faulds made his great discovery, his life took a path few Victorian doctors would ever imagine. After completing his medical training in Glasgow, Faulds chose not to stay in the comfort of a British hospital. Instead, he volunteered as a missionary doctor, a decision that would send him halfway across the world, first to British India, but eventually to a country that was only just beginning to open its doors to the West. In the 1870s, Japan was in the midst of extraordinary change. The samurai rule was ending and modernization was sweeping through its cities. Foreign visitors were extremely rare. Into this world stepped Dr. Faulds, carrying little more than his medical kit, in a land completely unknown to him. Faulds established the first English-speaking mission in Japan, with a hospital and teaching practices for Japanese students. He helped introduce antiseptic methods, founded Japan's first blind society, halted a rabies epidemic, was involved in the prevention of a spread of cholera, and even cured the plague infecting stocks of carp. His Tsukiji hospital in Tokyo was treating 15,000 patients annually by 1882. But he wasn't just a doctor. He became a student of the country around him, became fluent in Japanese, studied the culture, the people, and the traces they left behind. Japan would prove to be a turning point in his life, because it was here, amid ancient artifacts and the mysteries of a rapidly changing society, that Faulds' scientific mind would stumble upon something no one had properly understood before. Faulds was a close friend of American archaeologist Edward S. Morse, and whilst joining him on a dig, Faulds noticed something strange. Pressed into the clay of ancient pottery were the ridges of human fingertips, clear, distinct, and noticeably different from each other. He began to compare them out of curiosity, and eventually with growing excitement. The patterns were different, and not just slightly, but completely unique from person to person, and even from finger to finger. His work as a doctor saw children grow into adults, and the elderly were always within his care. This is when he realised something remarkable, that the patterns never changed. The swirls, loops and arches of a person's finger stayed with them for life. After many experiments, the proof was conclusive. Fingerprints were unique and permanent to the individual. This led Faulds to write to the scientific journal Nature in 1880, proposing something that no one had suggested before: that fingerprints could be used to identify criminals, solve crimes, and prove innocence or guilt with absolute certainty. It was a revolutionary idea that was decades ahead of its time, and although he didn't know it yet, his discovery would ignite a battle of recognition that would follow him for the rest of his life. Despite all his work, Henry Faulds would discover that having a brilliant idea wasn't always enough. After publishing his proposal in Nature, Faulds reached out for support among his peers. He wrote to Charles Darwin, hoping that the great naturalist would help bring attention to his discovery. Darwin, who at this point was old and in poor health, replied politely that he couldn't take on new work, but he passed the idea on to his cousin, Sir Francis Galton. Galton was already a well-established figure in the scientific world, and when he learned about the potential of fingerprints, he began conducting his own studies. His status, his connections, and his reputation meant that his work caught on much faster than Faulds' attempts. Before long, it was Galton's name, not Faulds', that became publicly linked with fingerprint identification. Faulds objected. He wrote letters and published articles. He argued passionately that he had been the first to recognise the forensic power of fingerprints, the first to test them, and the first to propose them for solving crimes. But Victorian science was a landscape of hierarchy, prestige, and connected people, and in that world, Faulds had little influence. Galton's fame overshadowed him completely. By the turn of the century, fingerprinting had become an essential tool in policing. Courts were using it as evidence, and detectives were relying on it to find their suspects, all built on the foundations that Faulds had laid. Yet Faulds had to watch from the sidelines, denied the recognition he deserved. In the years that followed, Faulds continued to push for recognition, but the world had already moved on. After initial dismissals, his discovery had taken a life of its own, becoming standard practice in police forces across the globe, but he saw little personal benefit. By 1886, after more than a decade in Japan, Faulds returned to Britain. He resumed his work as a police surgeon, first in London and later here in Staffordshire, serving the growing industrial towns of the Potteries. It was demanding work, with long hours in the service of ordinary people. It was far from the high society lecture halls of his ambition, but Faulds found himself once again using skills that supported the justice system he had once hoped to revolutionise. Yet an understandable bitterness regarding fingerprinting never fully left him. He continued to write letters and articles, insisting on the truth, but fame never came. Eventually he retired to Wolstanton, where he lived out the rest of his years. He died in 1930, quietly and without recognition, just like his work. And so, we return to this quiet corner of Wolstanton, to a simple grave in the shadow of St. Margaret's Church. There is no great monument here, no statue or long inscription, just the name Henry Faulds and a brief mention of his achievement, buried with his wife and daughters, a man whose discoveries shaped the modern world more than he was ever able to witness. Because every day, fingerprints solve crimes somewhere in the world and bring justice where it's needed. We rely on them so completely that it's easy to forget that they had to be discovered at all. But here is the man who first understood their power, a doctor far from home, a missionary in a changing Japan, a police surgeon in the Potteries, a scientist whose greatest idea was taken away from him. History is rarely fair. Not every pioneer gets their due, but by standing here and telling his story, we can keep his name alive. So if you ever find yourself walking through St. Margaret's in Wolstanton, stop for a moment and remember the man who solved a mystery written on every human hand.